The Australian Curriculum Studies Association would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and the waterways from where we are all meeting today. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We value the contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to education and their continued support of the teaching and learning of all Australians. We recognise that for thousands of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been the first teachers, and that we are committed to continue our learning alongside them. Welcome everyone to one thing we have been looking so forward to. This is one of our Masterclass series here at AXA. And what we are so looking forward to is engaging with our audience in some of the most really pressing things that we're looking for in education today. Now, many of you will be buying those books, have them on your coffee tables, have them in the staff room, and they're inspirational books all about education. So we are very lucky today to have Alicia Cohen from Amba Press, who is going to talk us through that journey and see if you too could be on a publishing journey. So welcome, Alicia.
Oh, thank you so much, Anna. It's a delight to be here today and, to chat through a bit about the publishing, the education publishing process.
And I think that's something that we see a lot of, and I think people might get caught up in publishing being academic papers, and we know that that's quite a big part, especially in when we look at curriculum, say in terms of the theory or the data behind it, that might be an area. But really, your area of expertise is really helping the voice of the educator and bringing that to the forefront to help the fellow educator who's actually maybe at the coalface looking for that inspiration and that kind of guide through the process.
Yeah, 100%. I moved into this field probably 4 or 5 years ago when we opened our Amba Press, and I was really quite particular about making practical tools for teachers, etc. I have come from a background of other publishers as well, and I guess that's probably one of the things we wanted to talk about today also was that, publishers do different things. They, each publisher has their own kind of way or style or kind of type of publication that they do and stuff like that as well, and each kind of have their niche, what they look for or what they want to publish as well. For publishers, a lot of the time is if you publish into an area, you're known for that area, and that's the kind of, they're the areas you go into and continue into. So, I've worked for some academic educational publishers in advance, and absolute joy, very similar the process to even what we have here at Amba Press as well. But, just different audiences, different types of work and stuff like that as well. I guess, to some extent, that actually does lead us into kind of our first tip that we want to talk about today as well. That was to some extent, it's starting off to have a think about, well, what do you want to talk about for the next 2 to 3 years? And I know you and I have been chatting about this a little bit as well. Many people who work in education or work around kind of education, come and say, well, should I be doing a PhD? Should I maybe be working on a book instead? And I guess, or they might have finished their PhD and been like, oh, I had that experience, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to write. Maybe not exactly what it didn't get to the audience that I wanted it to get to and stuff like that as well. And so, I really say to people, have a think about what you want to talk about for the next 2 to 3 years. I will actually flip over to my, it's probably one of my top tips. And, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to write about? What do you want to be out there, pondering, working around, talking about? And I think, a lot of people sometimes maybe, are in school and they might, adapt a framework. They might actually start seeing a model as well. We had a recent book with Stephen Trotter, and he developed a model for school improvement and a real leadership model as well. And I don't think, him, being a print, he thought to himself, oh God, this is, but it ended up saying, oh my God, this is actually what I want to talk about for the next 2 to 3 years, maybe even the next, 4 to 5 years, is this model and this idea that just won't go away.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because you put that time frame on that 2 to 3 years. And I think from an education lens as well, we often get caught in the trap of the educational fad that's coming in, or we have the old teacher saying, oh, we've seen this before, it just keeps coming back in the loop. And I suppose for you as a publisher, that nuance that you have to find is this really what's the chatter on the street? Is this what our readers would want? I know the demographic, I know what it is, versus it's great, but that's really a passion project. That's not really what you need to be doing.
Yeah. So I think that actually leads nicely into that second one about working out who your audience is as well. So, you know, have a think about, you know, who is it that you want to be talking to for the next, you know, 5 to years? Who do you want to make change with? Is that change with that classroom teacher? Is it that new classroom teacher, that early career teacher that's maybe a year or 2 year out? Is it potentially that teacher who might be, you know, 8 to 9 years out? They studied, but, you know, things that, you know, the research has actually changed a little bit from like 10 years ago. It hasn't, you know. But, you know, is it that person who's like, you know, 10 years in and, you know, let's update their skills? Or is it that teacher who might be like 20 years in, 30 years in, who's like, you can't teach me anything. Like, I'm good. I know how, you know, I've read the books, I'm cool, you know, I've got plenty of experience. But then also, you know, is it that leadership person as well? So I guess, you know, one of the things, and one of the things any publisher will talk to you about is, you know, who is your audience? Who are you wanting to connect with? Who should your work go to as well? You know, is your work of academic nature? Is it, you know, are you writing an academic book? Are you just academic? Is that where your life is? That go and talk to an academic publisher. If you are really wanting to connect with teachers, leaders, if you're wanting to kind of, you know, be presenting at things like EduTech and stuff like that, you know, go and talk to a professional publisher as well. Go and have a chat to them about what your work, you know, what you want to be doing over the next, you know, 3 to 5 years, how, you know, how you want to not leave your lasting legacy in, you know, written form, but, you know, how you want to portray some of your work as well. And, you know, how you want it to kind of, you know, fit into your ecosystem a little bit as well.
And I think that's beautiful in books in some way, because you actually feel the person coming through the book. Like you have a better connection with that person and their experience, because it is very much from the heart, and there is that kind of relationship very much embedded in that. And I think that's so beautiful, because I think, you know, teachers are so time poor. So to have something where they can go, I'm going to read a chapter tonight, put it aside, or I can read a whole book in a night, or, you know, I see a lot on the social media, you know, you see these teachers and they've got summer reading and the pile going down, you know, and it's quite a thing, because it's quite a nice visual as well, because I have to say most of my reading would go from, oh, you've read that, oh, I'm going to read that, or I'm going to read that. And I think that's a lovely way that a lot of teachers engage in a visual sense. You know, I think when you do look at academic study, it's normally because you are seeking your own academic work, or you're in that space. But I think for teachers who are time poor, that kind of that immediacy of like, oh, I can read one chapter and I've got 5 things I can take away and implement tomorrow. That's the power of, I think, the educational book.
Yes,
really,
100%. And yes, and it is about learning and teaching. And, you know, teachers are learners. You know, at the heart of all of this is, you know, you learn, we all learn, kind of to some extent. And I know I'm not phrasing that by any means, but it is some of that, and it is that some of that about refining your practice and, you know, consistently thinking and stuff like that as well. But yes. Working out your audience, working out who you want to talk with. And, you know, educators are so wonderful because they share their knowledge. You know, they actually want to share their knowledge. And this is actually like, I, you know, so many of my authors that come to me, or so many educational writers actually, you know, it is because they've written a blog for a couple of years, or they've got this, you know, this insatiable quest to get something off their chest, or, you know, they've done some research, and the research, you know, has shown this, but it's been great, but the PhD has been read by like 2 supervisors, and that wonderful research and that wonderful knowledge needs to actually be, you know, expressed in an accessible manner and actually got, you know, spread out to more people as well. And so that's, you know, that is actually such an important part of the writing process, is that back end of that publishing process. You know, actually putting yourself out there and, you know, having feedback. But it's not actually even about having feedback. It's about that conversation that can happen.
Yeah. And I think when, you know, our first one I spoke to you originally, I think what I hadn't been so aware of is that a lot of the people are putting themselves in that space in general, you know, as you're saying, like they attend EduTech or they attend another conference, and they're putting themselves in a space where they are running workshops, or they're sharing their knowledge, or they're part of a teach meet. So they're already in a kind of very proactive space. It's just that next leap of, I'm doing all this sharing, I'm doing this great stuff, I'm getting this wonderful feedback from people. How do I harness it? So I suppose in your sense, it's how do you find those people? Do they come to you, or do you seek them out, I guess?
Well, when I started Amba Press 4 and a bit years ago, I did seek out, one of my well, I remember I emailed Leon and was like, "Hi, massive fan of your blog. Will you talk to me about writing a book?" I'm like, "What was you thinking?" I had probably 2 or 3 books in the pipeline and stuff like that. I said, "Sure," and we chatted, and I saw the whole book, and and that's what happens. I saw his book, and I do after reading people. I see a book as well. If I see somebody, I will reach out, but most of the time, people run into me at events and we have a chat, and then we have a bit more of a follow-up chat. People contact me. It's actually, publishers do get contacted, and lots of people do write to me at different stages as well. And I guess that's one of the things is, this is our job, is to know people, acquire people, to be reading and stuff like that as well. I love reading people's blogs and reaching out to them when they touch me and stuff like that. It just or Substack and stuff like that as well. Medium, I do all that. I do, I know, you see me stalking people on LinkedIn as well.
Do your research,
and it's I think also people sometimes the people who are already writing do make good books, because there is a practice around writing, or a practice around putting your ideas out there and your thoughts out there and stuff like that. All that being said, if you don't, and you're not writing on LinkedIn, once a month, that's okay. You can still write a book, but there is something about people who the practice of writing leads people to write more and think they can write a book, and they can. Anyone can write, Actually, the truth is anyone can actually write a book, which actually might lead me to my preparing a table of contents and first chapters, because that might be a good segue. Because I do believe everyone has a book in them, and actually, you look at your, education. I mean, it might not be like when you're 21 or 22. Sometimes it's probably,
a bit of experience.
once you've got a bit of life experience. Yeah. But I guess, I guess people should be a little less nervous about, how you'd think about starting a book and stuff like that. I do have a chat to people. It's that, have a think about what you want to talk about. Then, what would 10 chapters look like? If you were going to write a table of contents on a topic, what would the 10 key things you want to impart on somebody?
Yes, exactly.
Start with those 10. Yeah. So I say start with those 10. A nice book is 10 chapters. It's not too much. It's not too little. If a school's studying it, it's a nice 10-week book group kind of club kind of space as well. Read a chapter a week and come back and talk about it kind of thing as well. But 10 chapters is a nice place to start. Some people write 21 chapters. Andrew Fuller's one of those people. He's got so many ideas and he has to write very shorter chapters. That's just how he works. But so I say start with 10 chapters. Then I say, then start having a think about, if you were going to write the 10 chapters, what would maybe be 3 or 4 subheadings in each of those chapters? What would be the 3 or 4 key things you want to cover off in that chapter? And to some extent, I say to people, think about those 4 maybe subheadings actually being potentially 4 little blogs. That you could, and that's also sometimes a lot of people test out some of their ideas by saying, well, that's actually only like an 800-word blog. And I'll test it out on LinkedIn just to, see how it feels, to see the feedback or if there's interest in it as well. So that's actually how a lot of people kind of see that first table of contents and how that, can be pieced out. Most publishers will say, put together an annotated table of contents. Give me a kind of vision of how it will look. And I really like to see that. I like to kind of see a vision of what it's going to look. And that table of contents becomes like a blueprint for your book of what you end up writing to. Most publishers will also say, I want to see a couple of chapters.
Yes. And see if you can.
See if you can.
Or be guided through the process,
Yes, spot on. And start seeing it kind of come together. Most of the time, within 2-3 chapters, if it's all kind of come, that you can start feeling it coming together in the writing as well. But, also check in, make sure it's good, make sure it feels right, it reads right. It's all kind of, that gives you I also say the first couple of chapters give you a sense of kind of the timeline of writing.
Yeah. Yes.
Because, if you're writing like a chapter a month, that's fine.
Yes.
That's fine, but that's just so then if you've got to write 8 more chapters, it can take you 8 more months.
Yes.
But if you're,
and it's interesting, the way you're talking about the system is from an educator in the classroom perspective. It is exactly what we try to do with children. You've got this long assignment to do. How do we segment it down to what you need to do? And at the very basic level, we hear a lot, especially in the kind of inclusivity space, of children who've got executive functioning concerns. And when you actually look at it, you go, well, I have that. I can't remember what's the next part. Whereas doing it like this, you go, yeah, but that just makes sense. We as educators do that every day. We break things down for all of our students. So why do we get overwhelmed by things when we actually know the system, we know the process, but it's someone telling us, okay, go next, go next, go next.
It's quite funny you talk about this as actually, because I actually see this to some extent. It is a bit of a process, and my cover designer does laugh because she says I'm the queen of process, and I like things. Not that I like things, but the better things go in that process, actually, the better the outcome is, and the better we can see it all kind of happens as well. It's funny you should say though as well, but also I do like to see consistency, and most publishers like to see consistency in those first chapters, and that's a bit of a tip. So most of the time nowadays most of our books have like a chapter summary at the end of the chapter. I'm a massive fan of a chapter summary. There's a couple of reasons. I'm human like everyone else, and if I don't get my book club reading done or that chapter read, I can read the chapter summary, which is 5 dot points, and I've probably got enough to sit in the conversation for half an hour and actually not kill myself. But also chapter summaries are just great because sometimes it's like, oh great, I did get that point, that point. To some extent, a chapter summary is those 4 or 5 dot points you've just the subheadings you've done as well. But I guess a publisher will want to see in those first couple of chapters some consistency, whether you have like a lead in, which is like a chapter intro, which tells them what they're about to learn. And of course we tell them then we teach them. And then we do the chapter summary, which tells them what they've just learned, because that's a nice way to kind of do a chapter as well. But, there's stuff. So we'd like to see those things. If you want pull-out boxes, show the publisher, put in a couple, start seeing that vision on paper of what that book could look like and stuff like that as well.
Definitely. Yeah, and that just seems a lovely way when you talk about that. But, what's really coming through very clearly here as well is the relationship between the writer and the publisher. Like that kind of, to be able to see and be on the same line as a vision. And, whilst all of us are different, it's being able to find that middle ground of saying, oh, I know where to push you here, or, oh, I'm going to try and sway you in this direction. And it's, as a person, you've got to take that feedback. You've got to trust the process, trust in the publisher. They know what sells the books, what the best thing. So I think that relationship must be something that is crucial to the start of the
Look,
process.
It is. You're spot on. I think finding the right publisher is 100% right. I have published with other people and stuff like that as well. And as I was kind of saying at the start, everyone does it a little bit differently as well. So work out who is the right publisher for you. I've actually got a slide which has some of the kind of the key education ones as well. All of these publishers are connectable on LinkedIn. And the other side is all of these publishing houses also have a submission process, which is also key. So, do connect with them also, but be aware that there's a submission process that they go through to make a decision about a book and stuff like that as well. Most of them will have a document that you need to download, potentially a book proposal as well. They will, of course, ask for those table of contents and those first couple of chapters, because that will give you a really good insight about you, your book and stuff like that as well. And, some of these are educational, academic publishers. Some of them do different things as well. So have a think about, who's who's published similar books to what you want to publish, what you want it to look like, who's the right kind of audience for you, who's on your bookshelf.
Yeah, exactly. And that was an interesting one because I'm looking at Springer, and obviously AXA, we use Springer significantly.
Yes.
We would have that partnership with, Curriculum Perspectives. But what's very interesting, and previously before I was in this role, is probably not being in touch with publishers. So that was the biggest thing. We've mentioned before, the LinkedIn. So being able to connect with them and actually just see their work coming through. And I found out, just following people like, oh, they do that. Oh my goodness, I'm going to follow them. And oh my goodness, he's affiliated with that publishing house. Oh, I'll check. And simply with, with you guys, I picked up the book, I think, from Leon, and then I looked on the website and I was like, oh my goodness, look at all these, and went straight away and bought a set for the school I was working at the time. And, but it was that kind of the knock-on effect, really, that really gets it out there. Which I found really interesting.
And you're spot on, because it is all about that knock-on effect and being, you find one, then hopefully that's the kind of, that's what you like to read, and that's what the publishers do. I just don't publish academic because that's what some of the other people do, and they don't publish practical. And it is quite funny. There is occasionally a chat, as sometimes, where people do get passed on from publisher to publisher at that time as well. But, the publishers are very friendly. We all know each other. We've all kind of, worked at different places as well. Yeah. But there's also big overseas publishers. There's a couple of Australians who've done very well with ASCD, with John Catt as well. So, don't think that, you can't go out and seek a big publisher or get interest from a big publisher as well. I guess one of the key things I was at a talk at a writers' festival recently, and some authors asked me, what would be my number one tip when going to a publisher. And this was a very open kind of conversation. Like, there was a lot of different people. I would say this to absolutely anyone I meet is have some sort of presence, an author website or some social media presence or something where people can access you. I do know of publishers, like especially in the business space, or the big trade publishers, they will not sign anyone without a website.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it? Really interesting. Yeah.
So,
because when I was thinking with you guys, what I noticed is that when I looked at yours, I was like, oh my goodness, I know him from my network of LinkedIn, and he's in my network of LinkedIn. And when you actually looked at it, I was like, I know all of these people from being present in that educational space. So it brought everyone together completely. And it was like, this is brilliant. Like, this is everybody in one place. But that was very much based on, we were probably all similar mindset, or the kind of people. And I suppose as a publishing house as well, it's you guys knowing who is going to be connected in that space that's going to attract that audience, who have the trust that you publish.
100%.
Yeah,
spot on. And you're right. And as that kind of, it brings in other people from that ecosystem and those connected to those, you hope that, what you're publishing is resonating, and it is that kind of that right ilk and that right fit and that right feel and thinking as well, and direction as well.
Yeah. So I suppose you're, as an author, you're completely new to this process, with something that, we haven't got expertise in as educators, we consume. But how do we go into that kind of negotiation, that conversation with you, and kind of work on that and go, where do I start in terms of knowing the process, and more the legal side of things, or an agreement? We're talking about that next. How does that work out?
Look, I think you start with connecting with a publisher and start going through that submission process. Look at their website, look at what they want you to supply, etc., and start that process. Most publishers are quite busy. I will be open with you, but if you don't hear back from them in a month or two, it's probably a no, and start with the next one, or start thinking about that one as well. The other side is you do need to chase a publisher as well. I don't mean to be rude about it, but the big houses, they are busy houses. There's a lot of authors, wanting to be published as well. So to some extent, I would say any kind of would-be author is, put in some effort, you know, go
Yeah.
after the publisher, chase them down, make a time to meet with them and stuff like that. You know, I do believe the best books happen with a conversation. You know,
Yes.
I want an author who wants to work with me, who understands a little bit about me, understands our press, you know, understands a little bit about kind of the opportunities, the community we have as well. And, you know, yeah, so most authors, you know, they want to start that relationship as well. The big presses, I will say, you know, there is quite a lot of touch points as well. There will be, you know, points where it will need to be submitted to a publishing team for a review. Routledge, where I used to work, does all that process as well. So it can take like 2 or 3 months to actually get a offer as well.
Yeah.
But they do offer, and, you know, people get published all the time, and it's absolutely incredible. You follow the steps, you go through the process, and oh my God, here you are, you're being sent an author agreement, etc.
Yeah. Oh, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's that kind of that patience in a new system and a new unfamiliar environment where you actually have to trust the system and trust the process, because it's not familiar to you. I think that's a big thing, isn't it?
But the other side is, you know, where we are, educators are lovely people. So educators talk to other educators and stuff like that as well. So, you know, if you've seen somebody who's published by somebody else, reach out to them and ask them. You can ask them for an introduction. You know, ask them to talk about their experience and stuff like that as well. Every publisher is a little bit different, how their back-end processes, how they do post-publication support. So reach out to another author and have a chat with them about their experience as well. You know, a lot of, you know, sometimes even the big name authors, like, you know, they publish sometimes with a couple of different publishers as well and stuff like that. You know, they publish, you know, their academic stuff with this person and practical stuff. So, but, you know, have a chat. But I guess the key thing is that you know, there's a couple of things. Once you get that author agreement, you're going to get a manuscript delivery date, which is really important. That's probably that key thing, is when are you going to hand in that manuscript? And that's what the publisher wants to know. You know, they want to know from those first couple of chapters, is it 4 months away? Is it 6 months away? Are you writing this in like 2 years' time? Because that's when you've got your your time period, or you've got your long service leave and stuff like that as well. You know, within the agreement, they will discuss things like royalties, author copies, copyright, all those things. All those, everyone's agreements are a little bit different, but they also are very similar these days, because, you know, you pay royalties, you do author copies, you do copyright and stuff like that. They're probably the key things you want to be looking at. Ensure, you know, you keep your copyright where possible. There's an agreement for author copies, so you know how much you can buy your copies for. Because, you know, the copies are a part of your ecosystem and your business, or your ed consulting, or whatever you're going to do next as well. And then the key thing is also, you know, royalties as well. You know, most of the time, most of these publishers will do print and ebooks very easily these days as well. So, you know, good to know how your book's going to be, where it's going to be advertised, when your royalties are going to come through and stuff like that as well. I think, you know, I'm going to be open with you, and I would tell anyone this. You don't do educational publishing for the royalties and the money. Like,
I was literally, whilst you were saying that before, I was going to say the next question is, like, you don't go into this thinking you're going to be a millionaire off the back of this. This is not
100%.
This is a love. This is genuinely your love that goes into this.
Look, I don't want to say you're not going to make like cups of coffee, but I don't want you to think you're buying a countryside, you know, a country weekend house. However, you know, there are other things. So, you know, I say that, and I don't want to underplay, because actually one of our authors the other year, first year, did, like, the book just did really, you know, and she just had, you know, it all just was the right timing. Everything was wonderful. She emails me back and says, oh my God, you've just paid for my 2 weeks in Thailand, the royalties. And I'm like, oh my God, how, you know. Wonderful for everyone. We all won out of that as well. But, you know, so I guess the other thing is the unknown opportunities that come out of writing a book, whether, you know, I do giggle that, you know, I find that within 6 months of publishing, most authors have had maybe a significant job change, or you know, they are now booked out for the next year as ed consultants or something like that, you know, because they put in the work.
Yes. And maybe that whole process of publishing, it's a confidence boost as well. It's like, oh my goodness, I can do this. And therefore, where's the next step, or what opportunities then am I going to take on the fact that I am an author now? And I've got credibility behind me to say, people are listening to me. Like, read the book.
You do
that's
have credibility. Like, not to be rude, sometimes it's quite, you're going to love this. So there's a time where we'll talk about this in the publishing process, but just before we hit print. So you get your final page proofs and I make you go to a coffee shop and I make you read your book from cover to cover. And look, this is a part in anyone's publishing process where you read your final page proofs. And it's like, oh my God, the book is as it's about to be, just doesn't have its cover. And you're like, oh my God. And I will say, I normally place a call with the author because there's normally some imposter syndrome that hits at that point. And you say, oh my God, here I am about to launch this onto the world. Here is me.
Bare my soul. Give it to everyone.
Yeah. And, imposter syndrome, but yes, it is a part of that process as well, getting through that kind of, yes, I can do this. Yes, I can, I can make it happen. Yes, I can, publish a book.
Yeah. And interestingly, even as one of your authors, I'd looked up, and we've done a few podcasts with some of your authors, but one, and it was that within minutes, I just felt, oh my gosh, this guy's gold. Like, it was just that kind of thing. Like, if he offered me a job tomorrow in his school, I'd be signing on the dotted line. Like, that sense came through, and consequently he's coming probably likely to be on our board as a new member, because I trusted in that process and went, wow, like, this person fits and beautifully in with what my beliefs are and what I would engage with. And that's, I think, when you open that up, that network becomes just such a beautiful process, because I've actually connected with someone, and that's it. I can learn from him, he can learn from me. We're in that space together.
Definitely. And there is something about putting yourself out there and, the feedback that comes up after the publication and stuff like that, and the different conversations. I will say, we had, just talking about EduTech the other week, we had an author, and one of the authors got quite a bit of the dud spot. The last session on the last day, it was getting very, very quiet, and, flew up to do the session and stuff like that, took a couple of days off work, and, and says to me, oh God, will you come? Of course I'll come, etc. Comes off the stage, there's probably 50 people, not like, unfortunately, the 250 that would have come at lunchtime, but the 50 people, and then comes off stage and says, you wouldn't believe it, but somebody came up and said, oh, would you speak with me in this, with this person? And he said, oh my God, every single moment of this whole trip and event has now been worth it. Just this one conversation where they exchange a business card, and he said, of course I said yes, and I will go out and do this thing that they've asked me to do internationally. And he was just, oh my God. And I'm like, oh my God. We're both like, oh my God, how amazing. What an opportunity. And that's the thing, it's that unforeseen stuff that sometimes comes from,
And also, that's something, we talk about this kind of the LinkedIn or whatever medium or your website. And I think a lot of people have trepidation because the persona that they show in online space versus their real them is often quite hard, because you don't get to portray that. And you're kind of following a rubric. And we look at marketing and promoting. There's people who do this for a living, and they can find the audience. And there's a lot of, maths and physics and all this kind of thing behind this whole process. But I think when those opportunities come to be yourself and put yourself as a person out there, and see the value of LinkedIn in being able to provide that opportunity for you to be in that space, that's the real kind of core, isn't it? And then you get to showcase who you are. And I think that's probably, I always say that to people, LinkedIn is a lovely place because it is a professional environment, and people who are on there are seeking that same thing in that environment. It's not about giving yourself some, being someone you're not. You can actually have that luxury of going, this is me, this is what I do.
And it's so true, because actually, also in our spaces, you actually run into people like on the regular and go to events, and it's, oh, hello. Yeah.
I know. And I don't know about you, but I find, especially doing this role now, is that reaching out to people who I would probably have gone, oh, they'll not even have the time to talk to me. They're right up there, and, I would never get all through the ladders of communication. And then the majority, I'd say 99% of people, are so open and willing to give you their time.
I was talking about this with an author this morning. Funny you should say this. About also part of the process is about, getting reviews. So, when we go through kind of the writing process, you write the book, etc. I say go and get some reviews. And anyone, the Routledge process has got a review process, as all the publishing process has, either a peer review process, etc.
Yes.
But, getting reviews, is such an important part of the process. Getting feedback and stuff like that, it does actually make you better. It makes you stronger.
Yes.
I will say with like all that feedback and stuff like that is, think about your audience. Is this something that's going to make a difference and help somebody the next day? Is this something, that academic work that has to go out there, that has to be published and stuff like that? Think about, the reviews are sometimes, hard to take, ask the right people, and the edu community is so, so generous. And, I talked to an author this morning and I reached out to this, like, my absolute edu hero.
Yeah.
And he wrote back to me. And then she's just like, and then I asked him to, quote him in my book, and he's like even going to write a foreword now. And it's like, oh my God, that, how wonderful actually that the edu community, edu leaders support each other, support others, and, bring up that next kind of community of writers and authors and stuff like that as well. And, thought leadership is actually what we're talking about here.
And I don't think that is a natural place for educators to sit. It's not part of the role that they were brought into. I think, you kind of do your job in this kind of your day-to-day, I certainly wouldn't say 9 to 5, because I know that for a teacher, it's literally 6 o'clock till 10 o'clock most days. So, you're in that space, and to put yourself into a networking space feels quite alien because it's not that normal space. And I think it took me a while. I remember even to go to conferences and go, why do I need to go to a conference? Like, I've got stuff to do. And exactly that. Like, I remember meeting someone, and I'll say her because she's one of my absolute fabulous friends, but I met Sarah Chapman, who I saw her work, found it fabulous, and I went to a conference and saw her and just was like, that's it, women in STEM, she's my hero. And subsequently, reached out to her. She then put me forward for a fellowship. We built this absolutely fabulous online relationship, kind of like, I'm backing you, you're backing me, that's it. And it was just that champion behind me. And then consequently, then to meet at conferences together, all those sorts of things. I just think, wow, that was so powerful. And I'm such a richer person for that along the way.
But I also think we've got such talent here.
Yes.
Oh my God. And this is like my big thing is like, we have such amazing talent in Australia and even New Zealand as well. I think, we should be showcasing the amazing things we're doing here. I think, probably like you, education, teachers get a bad rap with the media, but, I see amazing things going on every day. I see incredible teachers doing incredible things, educators, consultants, instructional leaders, really changing schools and changing our environment, school improvement that's going on. And I just think, wow, I want to showcase the amazing stuff that goes on and the amazing educators. Alice Vigors, one particular who, I've been with for a couple of years, and I just think, oh my God, you're a Prin, and, you're doing this for the joy of doing this, and what a joy it is to actually, work with some of these authors who are just at the top of their game, doing incredible things out there in schools. And that's the thing, like, we want to be showcasing the incredible work that people are doing and the incredible thought leadership that's going on. All publishers want to be doing that. And that's, to some extent, what we look for is people doing great things.
Yes, exactly. Because even I think I put out that, I was meeting with you to a group of the fellowship group, and it was more off the back of Andrew Fuller's work, which obviously we'd all been part of some of Andrew Fuller's work, and I put it out to our fellowship group, and automatically the response was so positive, like, oh, we'd love to learn more, we want to know how to do this, that kind of response, like, we're all proactive in this space, how do we get to do it, how, and just our discussion today is just that kind of opening that door to go step through, like, just go, you can do it, just make the leap into that publishing process, isn't it?
It is. And there is quite like a process amongst the middle of it. But, this is what, publishers, and this, my whole 20-year career has been that publishing process as well. So, and most of these publishers, most of the other publishers, that's what they do, is make great books and beautiful books that are right for the market. So if it's chosen, etc., that's kind of what happens, etc. But, so much of it also is that back end of that publishing process that we've talked about today is also that, that website, the speaking engagements, the other opportunities, like the online courses. I'm always amazed about the online courses and stuff like that people are creating and doing. And I think, oh my God, how amazing. Like,
I know.
And sometimes somebody's done an online course and then come to me and say, well, actually it's done well and I want to make it into a book, which is great. But the other side is, a lot of people end up putting a book out there, and then other opportunities like online courses and speaking engagements and stuff like that. And I always see this as like an ecosystem of, how can we, support that teacher, support that model, support that idea. Everyone learns differently, I'm not trying to.
No, you're completely right. Yeah.
But like,
what works
I'm a reader. What works for I'm a reader. Like, I don't naturally listen to podcasts. I do if it's somebody I really want to listen to, or somebody I want to, but it's not, I don't put them on the car. I read books. And like, there are a lot of people out there who this is like some of their enjoyment, to read books. Like, what a joy. You read books.
Yeah, and that's for me. Like, I'm exactly the same. Like, I'll listen to podcasts, and if it doesn't catch me in the first, like a book, it doesn't catch me, then I'm done. And I'm probably a little bit quick to go, move on. I've got my real thing. I've got a big thing for, certain podcasts where I've learned so much from them. But in general, there are just some that resonate, some that don't. And actually, what's really weird is that I find most of things like podcasts or books through the online reels or the Facebook or the Instagram or that sort of thing. I'll go, I'm actually gonna go find that one out, because I've really, and it's those little vignettes which actually capture it the most, isn't it? You go, that person is along my line. So I think probably that's where most of mine come from. And interesting, you were talking about that. I'd seen a little reel, and it was very sweet. It was of a gorilla, and he's looking left and right, and it was talking about some, a kind of way of, if you don't show me, I can't understand. And it was this person talking, and you put this left and you put it right, and then you put it in a corner, and you do this and you do that and you do that. And everybody resonated and went, oh my goodness, that's me. Like, unless I can see it, or unless you show me how to do it, it's just the noise. And it sort of also helps you reflect as a teacher and go, oh, wow, as you say, not everyone's going to do it the same. Some people or some children need a different approach. And, same as with reading, I think, especially for young children, the accessibility of reading can be difficult, and often they're penalized for that. But, the introduction of audiobooks, or being able, some of that technology that we're now in, that kind of speech to talk, is really powerful. So everybody can access good literature, or, 100%. Access this sort of thing. And it's fabulous.
Yes, 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And audiobooks are 100% books. It's just that consuming of content and stuff like that as well. The more we consume. And it's an interesting one, because I will say writing has changed, though, over the last, as we're talking about influencers and social media and reels, think about this world that we're talking about, we are seeing writing has changed a little bit as well, about how, writing is a little bit more chunky, how we write to parents is very different, we don't publish like big tomes anymore, as and stuff like that. We're really about that accessibility as well. So, that's the other thing we say to people and authors to have a think about is, also have a think about how you're writing these days and what you're communicating, and the audience who's taking it on. Is it early career teachers, and do they need vinaigrettes and stories from other young younger ones? What is it?
100%, and I think that is really important, because it's the immediacy now of information that we get. We talk about that with children. They're getting it thick and fast through the online space, and it's like they're taking in massive amounts of information, which we wouldn't have done before. And obviously sometimes writing has to change that. But what I really passionately believe with writing and reading is that the power of the ability to be in a space which is calm and quiet, and that mindful meditation, which I always find I'm passionate about early childhood and science and that STEM space. And I believe that play-based learning where children are immersed in something and they have their whole body experience in it. And it is so intense. And it comes out and we're sort of compartmentalize everything so quickly that we then are actually having to reteach children to be in the moment, to be mindful, to have space, make space. And reading's just a natural thing that happens when you do that. You become a different calm person. You give your time and attention. And there's times where actually you haven't got that mental capacity to read because you're all over the place. But
it's funny you should say that, but I also say on the other side, yes, that space for reading, but the other side is also finding that space for writing. And I guess that might be a nice finish off for us, because I guess no matter, here we have talked about that kind of real end process of writing a book to some extent, but I don't want to discourage people because all writing is good writing. And, and I say to people, yes, you might listen to this today, but actually, your book might not come for 5 years. Or I say to people, sometimes it's not there, and that book, that right book or that right concept, it will come. And I do believe, to some extent, everyone's got writing in them or a book, and it might not be a book, but it might be an article. I guess I'm standing here flag flying, writing anything, write for the ASOL Journal.
Yeah.
Or write, just write a piece on Substack, even if it's, just your musings and stuff like that. That eventually might become a practice where you write and publish once a month. That might 5 years down the track become the musings of, the first initial introduction chapter for a book as well. I guess I'm more, a lot of authors do find that flow that you talk about when writing, or when because it's a process of, finally I get this chance to say what I want to say. I've been in a classroom for 20 years and I've observed this, and I just really want to tell people to do it this way, or,
And I think we've seen that quite a large amount in the self-help book, or those health issues. Someone's been through a process and they might write a blog for cathartic reasons or for various reasons. And I know a beautiful one that was done, I think, from one of the publishers from the Mamma Mia series, and it was just one of those things where it was so right for where I was, or whoever was. And I think they realized the power of that, of actually what your experiences are so valuable to someone else, but you probably don't know that until you throw yourself out there.
Exactly. And that would be my closing message is enjoy writing, put yourself out there, because, we've got such talent here in Australia and such talented educators, leaders in our schools and in our networks. And, what a joy it is to be helping them put their ideas out there as well.
Yeah. Oh, Alicia, I could talk all day, but,
You and I could talk all day. We'd have a blast. It would be great.
I suppose for our viewers and listeners today, the best part is now, if they're even in that process or conversation, I suppose it's to reach out, isn't it? Have that immediate conversation, if it's with yourself or someone else that I'm with. But I suppose look at what's out there. But I think definitely reaching out to yourself, and how you come across as such a lovely person that I know that I.
Or come and introduce yourself at at an event or EduTech or Ed Summits. Come chat to me, do a call, etc. Talk to one of my other authors as well. I guess that's also a really good intro. Even if you're still a little bit nervous, talk to another author. People like Matt Pitman are wonderful. Andrew Oberthur, I know you.
Fabulous.
Really generous with their time with other people and supporting people in. And, that is, that's what the one thing I will say about educational people, leaders, teachers, they are so generous with their time and learning for others, and what a joy. Yeah.
I know.
What a community.
What a great job you have. Well, thank you very much, Alicia. It has been wonderful. And we hope that our connection can continue and that AXA can work with Amba on what we can hopefully be a lovely relationship to get more of your wonderful books out to more of our listeners. Thank you.